Now we move to the final division in the Pacific. The Calgary Flames will work from top to bottom. You know what? They've already made two trades, really. If you go back to the Toffoli trade, they get Yarncroc in and paid a fairly hefty price. 3 draft picks for him. Frank, do you believe that Brad Treliving's done, or does he add a depth defenseman?
I think they get a depth defenseman, and I think they just get the best one they can find before Monday at 3 p.m. for the least cost.
Any chance they bring Hamonic back?
Not at that cap hit.
Okay. So yeah, depth defenseman. I think they've made their moves up front. They go for a depth. Now, I do want to ask.
I love the Yarncroc trade. Like I actually love both these trades, and it's not recency biased based on Toffoli and the success that he's found in Calgary. I feel like these are two trades that were really well thought out and curated. I think that's the best word, is that the fits and the comfort level with all these guys, between everyone knowing Toffoli, Sutter, he played for him, played with Milan Lucic, played with Sean Monahan. And then you bring in Yarncroc, who's cousins with Lindholm and grew up in the same town as Markstrom, Gävle, Sweden. And I just love the versatility that he provides. Brad Treliving called him a 3-position forward. He can play any spot on really any line. He can kill penalties. He's diligent. He works. He grinds. And then Toffoli gives you the scoring punch. Like, I really, really like Calgary's team, and I would not be surprised at all to see them go on a deep run.
You have Sean Monahan. Before I move on, I just have to ask. You have Monahan on your trade bait board. I think you have him at 19th, I think it is, or 20th or 18th, something like that. Anyway, 15th now. You trade Sean Monahan. That obviously frees up a lot of cap space. It could give you the option to re-sign Johnny Gaudreau, who's going to get a bump from his 6.75, and I think they'd love to re-sign him. How realistic do you think a Sean Monahan trade is? And if they do it, Frank, what would they want in return?
Well, at this point, what they're doing is getting out from under his contract. And if it's just to dump the money, like if it's to get someone else now to help them, I could see them doing it. But if it's just to unload the contract, they're just going to wait till the summer to do that. And someone will take him off their hands, because I think there's teams interested to say, hey, this guy's 27. He was historically an easy, reliable 30-30 guy every season, 30 goals, 30 assists. And now his game has fallen off a cliff. He's playing 4th line minutes. I think he's the perfect insurance piece if you don't have something else big lined up. But if you do, he's also a really easy guy to move to free up the space, because it's dollars in, dollars out. So that's why he's on the board. I don't know how big of a swing they're going to take, but I don't know. They're an interesting team. I think they're going to keep trying.
Okay. Speaking of interesting teams, the Los Angeles Kings, 2 huge wins here recently over Florida and San Jose, when you consider all the injuries in LA. Because if you just look at cap hit, Frank, on the IR, Doughty 11 mil, Brown 5.8, Arvidsson 4.2, Matt Roy 3 mil, Andres Athanasiou 2.7 mil, Brendan Lemieux 1.5 mil, Sean Walker's on LTIR at 2.6. Like, it's ridiculous how much money. We're talking close to 30 mil. Now, I know LTIR gives them space, but when you're on IR, you're still counting on the roster. They got a bunch of young guys. Like, I think last night they had something like, I want to say 7 forwards making less than $1 million in their lineup last night due to all of these injuries, right? And I think they only had 3 players making more than $2 million in the IFL. Yeah, they are. I think the LA Kings are a pretty good team. You look at them really since in the last 25 games, they've been right up there. I think they have the 3rd best points percentage in that time. They're 14-5-3. They've had these injuries. They fought through them for the recent games. Like, we had Luc Robitaille on last week, and, he kind of said what they're looking for. Like, I expect the Kings to add at least one piece, to say to their team, hey, you guys, we've done something. They're going to break and mortgage the future, I wouldn't think. But I've been really impressed by the LA Kings.
Hard
And
not to be.
yeah, and so I'm kind of intrigued to see, who they would look at as a rental, that because they do have tons of prospects. Right now, that doesn't mean you're just going to want to give them all away by any stretch, but like I'm wondering, I know it might be odd because he's right their neighbor, but do you think a Ricard Raquel to LA makes any sense to you?
Mm, that's one name I hadn't considered. I don't necessarily think so just because of being
Anaheim,
rivals,
LA?
but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know that Anaheim's dying to do LA any favors. Um, I've honestly spent more time focusing on their defense, and I love the young guys that they've brought up. I think Sean Dursey's been great, but I think their defense really gets thin in a hurry. You have Doughty, of course, at the top, and then you got this kind of big drop off between Edler, Mata, and Matt Roy. I'd put, Roy in the second spot. Mikey Anderson had played really well. They missed him for a stretch in January, and I think you could tell when he was out. But that's that. I know a lot of people have honed in on their left side, and I said a guy that makes complete sense is Brandon Hagel for a lot of the same reasons we talked about.
Yeah.
And just the heart. But I still think they need some help on their back end as well.
Yeah, and I would agree with you that like unless they swing for one of the bigger ones, right? Like after you get past like a Lindholm, and we talked about, if they're not going to trade him Raquel, they're probably not trading him Lindholm. So, the risk of him going to LA would not be ideal for the Anaheim Ducks. Now, if he signs there as a free agent, you can't control it, but trading him there, you can control. So I don't think there's any chance. The problem is once you get past, the top D men, and, if we assume now, I know that, there was lots of LA rumors that are trying to get Chychrun, and, you've said that you're not sure he's going to get dealt. So the problem is after the next guys, like Nick Leddy might make the most sense to the LA Kings on the back end.
But
like
I don't think they're a team that's in a position to be spending a lot on rentals. Like unless you're planning on signing Leddy.
Yeah.
Which is possible, I guess. I don't see them as being a big rental spender. I don't know that, like, I think at that point you just roll the dice and you say, let's just stick with what we got.
Yeah, that's fair.
Let's get our kids experience, and let's get them important playoff experience.
Like if you look at any of the other defensemen available, like are they clearly, better than what they have? Right. Like you could go, you could go get a Colin Miller, for instance, right? If you wanted to, but like maybe Carson Soucy, because he can play both sides, but Calvin DeHaan's probably more of a rental, right, Frank? So like when we say defense, I'm not sure I agree with you, but I don't know if, unless they go for a rental, or any of the other guys like that much better of an upgrade.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
And that's where I'd say just stick with what you got.
Yeah.
I think if you're trading and you're LA, you're trading for a guy that has term.
Okay. The Edmonton Orders, Frank, have been, now here's some numbers for you. The Orders, everybody remembers they were 16-5, best team in the NHL. Then they had a swoon where they were the worst for 15 games. Now, though, in the last 23 games, the Orders have the sixth best points percentage again. They're 16-7-2. They're healthy again. And in that swoon when they went 2-11-2, they played 11 different defensemen in 15 games. So what does Ken Holland, like, does he owe his team? I know he doesn't have a ton of cap space, right? Like they sent Brad Malone down last night. They're just trying to save every little penny that they can. He creates some space for them to acquire someone. But like when I look at outside of 15 games, the Orders have been really good. Yeah. So should Ken Holland maybe do more than people think?
Maybe, but I don't think that they will.
No. Because like a left defenseman would help them.
Yep.
Someone
with some size, a shutdown guy would be good.
A shutdown guy like Carson Soucy isn't overly physical. Right now, the advantage of Soucy is he can play both sides, though. He can play left or right. So that's helpful. I think the asking price right now is a little high after what Seattle saw Ben Sherratt get, because Soucy's got 1 year left on his contract as well. So, like Edmonton, I don't know if they really need any forwards. They already made a big splash in Evander Kane, and he's been good. And Nugent Hopkins is coming back. Like their top nine for the first time in a long time is actually pretty deep. So like I don't know if they were willing to do it, but like I wonder, I don't think they're ready, but I really question if maybe they should take a big swing bigger than maybe they're thinking on doing, because their team outside of 15 games when their defense core was depleted, they've actually been really good.
Yeah. I I don't think they're going to do anything on the goalie front either.
No.
So you're
Well,
looking
I should say this. They did inquire about Fleury, but so they would have if he
I think
was
they've
interested, but
inquired
he's
about
not.
a ton of guys.
Yeah. But there's not many other goalies that are clear upgrades that are available. That's the question.
And that's what they determined, right? So
Yeah.
I don't see, and Koskinen has actually played quite well. And he poo-pooed the notion this week, of course, that it's because, you can't let him run with the ball for a while, that
And then he let in 5,
much.
Frank.
Yeah.
So sorry. That's not anything made up. There's statistical data.
100%. I just thought it was interesting that he tried to contest it. I don't know. I don't see Edmonton being a ginormous player. I don't think they're not trading their first round pick. I don't think they're trading one of their top prospects. What are their trade chips? That's what I keep coming back to.
Yeah. I think Ken Holland maybe could be a little bit more aggressive, because I'll say this: Edmonton has matched up well against Calgary for a long time. And right now it looks like Edmonton and LA are likely going to meet in the first round. And, I think if you're the Orders, you'll take your forward group against them. And I think you'll take your defense group against them. LA probably has the advantage in goal a little bit right now.
I think both teams, you're rolling the dice and you're going, we're going in as we are. And whoever comes out, comes out.
Yeah. But Edmonton, I do think, will add a left defenseman at bare minimum. I'm not sure.
But how big of an acquisition is it?
I don't think it's huge, to be honest, because the biggest organizational depth they have is on left defense. Like that's the most organizational depth they have coming. They got Broberg coming. They got Niemelainen. You got Samorikov. They got other guys in the American League they like. So, to acquire a left defenseman with term when you have Keith and Nurse again for next year, that's their challenge. Ideally, they would like to acquire, I think, a right defenseman, but that's probably more of an off-season summer trade, where, you move out maybe a Tyson Barrie, who I think has value because he's an offensive guy. It's 2 years left. He doesn't have a ridiculous contract. He's under $5 million, but that's probably a summer trade. So I don't think Edmonton's going to add. The only wild card here, Frank, is maybe if there's interest from an American team for Josh Archibald, if they can get a player back. I don't think they're going to trade Archibald just for a 6th or anything like that. If there's a team that thinks, hey, we'll trade you our guy for your guy, because Archibald's more valuable to a U.S. team where he can play virtually every game. So that's the one kind of little caveat there.
Does Nick Leddy make any sense?
Well, I like Nick Leddy a lot. I think it'd be ideal. But what's going to be the rental cost for him?
I said it's a 2nd round pick.
Well, you know what? Because technically, they don't 100% own the second. The odds are it's probably going to be a 3rd that goes to Chicago in that Duncan Keith trade. So maybe you spin it. It's a 2nd rounder. Depending on the Keith. If it's not Keith, then you can do it, or you push it to 2023. Although it's a deeper draft, but yeah, you could make that work. Nick Leddy would be an ideal player for the Edmonton Orders.
I've scoured the list, and I'm not seeing anyone else that really gets you excited.
Yeah. The problem with Nick Leddy, Frank, is the Orders don't have a ton of cap space, and people are like, well, throw in Kyle Turris. Well, Kyle Turris is on LTIR right now, so he's not even counting against you. So throwing him in the deal doesn't really free up any money for you. So if Edmonton's going to make a deal like that, they've got to ship out some money the other way. They have to, because Nick Leddy, even if you're taking half, it's 2.75. Right.
Right. So who would be the guy? Are you trading Lagesson?
Yeah, you could throw him in the deal, sure, but he's is he even 800,000? I don't think so.
He's 725. I'm just doing the math on Leddy at 5. It gets you closer, at least. Yeah, because you're just assuming that Detroit's eating half.
Yeah, and maybe you have to get creative, and there's a 3rd team in there, but then you know what I mean. Then you're paying.
Then
more.
You're paying more, and you don't really want to do that.
Edmonton's in a tough spot, Frank, because I think their team might be better. I think so many people focused on the 15 games is they don't look at the other 2 games where they're 32-12-2 when their team isn't ravaged by defensive injuries. And by the way, when Connor McDavid was less than a point a game player. which is unheard of.
Right.
So, Edmonton might be surprisingly good, is all I'm saying. But I'm not sure they'll make a move, and I think that they might regret not doing that. So, then you get down to now you got teams that this is intriguing to me. The next few teams in this division, Frank, because they're all battling and hoping to be playoff spot. But Vegas has got all sorts of injury issues. So, do they just stand pat? Like, is it worth it if you're Vegas to make a move?
Maybe for a goalie, because I think if you get better goaltending, you might be able to squeak in.
Yeah.
Like Edmonton doesn't have that spot locked up by any means.
Yeah, I don't see Vegas catching Edmonton, man. Vegas, Frank, for the last 2.5 months, they're like 26th in the NHL in points percentage.
Yeah, but like, what's to say that the Oilers don't have another 15-game or 20-game run like they did?
Well, if the only reason that happened though was due to significant injuries, right? So if they're healthy, there's no reason to believe they would have a swoon like that.
I mean, the other team they could catch is Dallas.
Yeah, that's who the battle is. And Dallas, you've talked about it, points percentage and games in hand. That's Vegas' challenge here. Like Vegas is, and they don't have a lot of home games. Like they don't have a great schedule either, Frank. Like as we've talked about, Vegas isn't paying for the first time, but I know they're highly aggressive and I'm very intrigued to see what they do. I wonder, do they wait to see what the Jack Eichel news is?
Well, that's part of it. I mean, their injury list is bonkers. Like, absolutely bonkers.
Crazy. Yeah, I thought LA had injuries. Then you go to Vegas.
Here's the list. Jack Eichel, Mark Stone, Max Pacioretty, Robin Leonard, Riley Smith, Alec Martinez, Braden McNabb, Nick Hague, and Ben Hutton has COVID.
Like, that's 3 of your top 6 forwards.
It's $50 million if Eichel's out.
Yeah. But think about it, Frank. That's 4 of your top 6 forwards. Your starting goaltender, 2 of your top 4 defensemen. Like, how can you expect to win?
That's where they're at, though. They're probably saying, how could we expect to improve this team? All we need to do is get healthy.
Yeah, would Vegas sell off a piece?
I was wondering that, but I always think of Bill Foley, and I think of being there on the night their logo was revealed. And he said, the Golden Knight always advances, never retreats. And in capital letters on the wall in their office, never retreat.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't see it, but I think if anything, they do nothing before selling off.
The Vancouver Canucks, a tough loss to Detroit last night. That's a devastating one for them. They've got interesting, Frank, because you look at their position, and they're chasing Vegas and Dallas. They do have 1 game in hand on Vegas, but Dallas has games in hand on them, and they're ahead of them in points, I think, now by 3, right? Plus they have 3 games in hand. Would you sell if you're Vancouver here in the next 72 hours?
I would, yes.
Do you think they will?
I just think the math is overwhelming. I know that they've done a great job of getting back in the race, and again, full marks to them. The fact that they're even in this conversation after where they were in late November, I have nothing but respect for the Canucks and their players and the job Bruce Boudreau has done. I think ultimately the Brock Besser trade, if it happens, waits until the summer. There's an outside chance it develops before Monday. I think they're trying to move some of their other contracts that they find to be less palatable, but good luck. I mean, I think they're trying to move Hamonic and his deal. I think they're trying to move, my guess would be Tucker Pullman, maybe, depending on his injury. I would guess Jason Dickinson would be another guy, depending on his injury. And then that brings us to Tyler Mott. I've seen their reply or response is that they need something meaningful in order to move him. I saw one report saying must be a top 40 pick. I don't see anyone being willing to pay a top 40 pick for Tyler Mott. That's just me.
Well, that's a polite way of saying first round pick, Frank, because no one in the first 8 picks of the second round is trading for Tyler Mott.
Exactly. And do you see that happening? Do you see Tyler Mott getting essentially a first round pick?
I'll always say this. Paul Gostad got a first rounder. Anything can happen.
Well, at least you could make the argument that Paul Gostad was a top 6 forward.
Well, no, I don't think he was. I think it was at that time of the trade, he was that's when Nashville, I still remember that one. I was like, Paul Gostad got a first, right? Now Barclay Goodrow got a first too, but he had term and he was a younger player. So anything could happen. I guess all it takes is one team, as you said at the top, Frank, right? All it takes is one, but I would be surprised. I would be surprised.
So they haven't had or made any meaningful progress on talks with Tyler Mott. Are they in a position where they can afford to go through the deadline and let him walk for nothing when you know that the odds are you have a 1 in 5 shot to get in?
Fair
so
point.
Is getting a third for Tyler Mott, is that criminal? Like, I don't think so. If you're not re-signing him, like, take the pick.
Yes, I agree. If you know
That's
he's not coming down.
But I mean, clearly the Vancouver market doesn't feel the same way.
Now, the Anaheim Ducks, they already moved Josh Manson. I think they got a pretty decent return. I kind of like that trade for both sides. You got Rickard Rakell and Hampus Lindholm. We've talked about them a lot. Do you see anyone else in Anaheim who's moved?
Nick Laurier, potentially. Gosh. He's the next guy up, number 51 on our trade targets board.
There's another player, Frank, when I look, like Anaheim has, like, they might be in retool mode, right? Or whatever term you want to say. But man, Nick Laurier, he's the perfect type of player that I would keep on your team. He's one of the toughest guys in the league. He makes everybody around him a little bit bigger. And he's not just a tough guy. He kills penalties. He's $1 million player.
So re-sign him.
Yes.
Let him trade him and then re-sign him in the summer. What do you need? What do you need him for? You're not making the playoffs.
No, that's fair. Sure.
If you think really love him that much,
yeah,
re-sign him, because no one's going to be banging down the door to pay him big money. So you're going to have just as good a chance as anyone else.
Well, then you know what? I think Nick Laurier has some really good value to teams. I think people who maybe don't watch the West Coast Anaheim Ducks very often, Nick Laurier, man, like Frank, there's just not many guys with his skill set.
He's the last of a dying breed.
Yeah, but he's a tough guy who can play, and he plays on their penalty kill, for goodness sakes. Like he would be intriguing to me. Like, I think a lot of teams, and if Nick Laurier is out there, I think there'd be lots of teams that could use him to bolster their fourth line and really help in a role. Yeah. So
I don't understand the Max Comtois thing at all. I really don't.
Now, what happened there?
He led their team in scoring last year.
Yeah.
I think trading him now would be a big mistake.
Agreed.
Rickard Rakell, though, what's he going to get and where's he going to go? That's the only thing I don't have any real insight on.
I don't think the return's going to be as high as the Ducks are hoping.
I don't think so either.
Yeah. I think Rickard Rakell is a Monday deal, Frank, where, Pat Verbeek looked and searches the market and then realizes that maybe he's not going to get what he was hoping for and then settles for the best deal that's left.
What is it? A second round pick?
Yeah. And maybe like a B prospect possibly with it. Maybe. Right. Or a second. And I could see getting like a second and a fourth or a second and a fifth. We've seen guys get stuff like that. So
don't talk about Tyler's man crush that way.
Yeah. So, and you know what? Rickard Rakell could help you. I just think right now, because of how he's played the last, year and a half, his trade value isn't as high as it would have been in the past.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what the question is. Rickard Rakell is always the answer.
Love it.
San Jose Sharks. Would you move Barabanov if you're the San Jose team who doesn't have a lot of money and he's been playing in your top 6 all year long?
Yes.
Okay. So, and I think he would have interest for teams.
Yep. I think he definitely has interest for teams. A lot of teams have talked about him, but San Jose is in re-sign mode again. As soon as they finished off with Hurdle, they turned their attention right to Barabanov.
Yeah. And I could see why they'd want to re-sign him, right? You talked about it earlier. They don't have a lot of depth forwards around him. So the other guys in San Jose that, because guys like this get moved all the time, they've got experience, they can play in your bottom 6, they can fill in, and neither one of them have a big cap hit, I think. Now Nieto does have 1 extra year, but Andrew Cagliano is a pending free agent. I could see him being moved, but other than that, like, I'm not sure San Jose, like, Is somebody going to take Jacob Magna as a depth defenseman?
No.
You know, bigger body. We talked about left D, right?
Jacob Middleton is a guy that's been talked about.
I wouldn't trade Middleton if I was San Jose.
The ask is insane.
Yeah, which as it should be.
Should it? How good is he?
Well, he's not that but he's valuable to what we just talked about it, Frank. They got 3 defensemen making what, 26 mil? Jake Middleton is tough. He can defend and he's not going to be expensive. They're going to need some value contracts to ice a lineup in the future. I think trading him would be a bad mistake, me personally.
Okay.
But if you're right, if someone's willing to pay that absorbent price, then maybe. But even then, when you start trading away NHL players for futures and you don't have a lot of NHL players, then you stay near the bottom. At least that's how I view it. So, and lastly, Frank, Seattle.
By the way, both these two teams are actually tied together I wanted to mention and run through this. Third-party brokers are going to be such a big part of the deadline and how it works.
Yes.
We've seen almost all the transactions that have been made this week have had retained salary. So the teams that are in the mix to retain salary are Seattle, are San Jose, Arizona, New Jersey, Columbus, Anaheim, Detroit, and Buffalo.
Okay. Yeah, well,
so those are among the teams that are right there. And Seattle, of course, they're willing to get creative. They've got $34 million in cap space to burn. It's, it's like vacation, use it or lose it. So if you don't use it, you're not taking it with you next season.
Yeah. San Jose's owner has always been, he just showed it with the Hurdle one. He's not afraid to spend money. They don't have, they traded away their 2nd and their 5th already. Now they did get Buffalo's 5th back, but I could see San Jose trying to recoup some picks. Obviously it wouldn't be a 2nd, I wouldn't think, and retain value, but another
depends how much you're retaining.
Yeah. So Seattle, Giordano is the obvious name for him. You have him right near the top of your board. Mm-hmm. Carson Soucy, as well as somebody that's being talked about. It's a little bit different because he has term remaining. Mm-hmm. But other guys in Seattle, like Ron Francis at the time, Frank, a lot of us questioned their strategy at the expansion draft. I think it's proven. They've already got 2 seconds and 2 fourths. They've got 2 seconds and 2/3 and 2 fourths next season already. Like, does draft picks, you can only have so many at the end of the day, right? So I wonder, like, what do you think the strategy here is? And is Marcus Johansson the other guy in Seattle that's likely to move?
I think there's a bunch of guys that could move. Donskoy, depending on his injury. I think a lot of teams are interested in Jeremy Lauzon, pending RFA. You mentioned Soucy. I just don't think they're married to anyone. That's what I've been told about Seattle is they like some of their guys, obviously re-signing Jared McCann. They like Yanni Gourde, Marcus Johansson available, Mason Appleton available, Riley Shahan available, Colin Blackwell available. All of, you could make a deal, make a move for any one of these guys that's out there.
Okay. But like not outside of Giordano.
They're looking for picks though. Like I don't think they're getting roster players back in return. I don't think they're making, I could be wrong unless there's something that pops up. I don't know that they're making hockey transactions now.
Other than they might take guys back just to make the cap hit work, right?
Cap hit work, and they also need to. They're willing to take on bad contracts in addition to cap hits, but they want teams to pay dearly to take on a bad contract back, as opposed to just retaining. And they also need bodies. Like they need warm bodies because they don't have a system that's fully formed out in the minors. They only have 10 other guys under contract. Yes. So they need people to play out the string if they're trading people away. So look for them to do that at some point if that's what they're doing.